Alright, so practice exam 1, spring 2023. So the first question is, how can you comment single lines and multiple lines in Python? So single lines, you can use the hashtag or the pound, whatever you want to describe that symbol as. Alternatively, for multiple lines, you can use a triple quote. So you can use a block quote. Question 2, what is the output of the following program? So whenever we have the end equals parameter, it basically replaces the basic new line character with whatever is going to print out here, right? So in this case, instead of a new line, which we're familiar with for a print command, it would end up being plus plus, plus or 3 quotation marks. And then, so in that case, it would look something like 3 quotation marks. And then we have another print statement that says, we are halfway through the course, yay, where end is equivalent to an exclamation mark instead. And then we have the same thing as the first one, where it's a triple quotation mark. So we get boop, boop, boop. Question 3. What is the output of the following program if the user input is 3? So A equals input of enter a positive integer. Worth noting, input by default is a string value. So B equals the integer of A times 3. Note that this is A times 3 within the parentheses, so basically this is the string value of A times 3 instead of the integer value of A times 3. So because of string concatenation, this would be 333. It would be different if it was, say, B equals int of A times 3, because then obviously it would be the numerical 3 times 3, which would be 9. Good on that section for module 1. Let's see. If they asked us to type out the output, would we have to put the result in quotes to clarify it is a string? Um, Typically, yes. So if it is a string of 5 versus the integer of 5, most traditionally a string of 5 has double quotes, a character 5 has single quotes, and then 5 would just be the integer value. If they technically ask you for a decimal, you would probably put 5.0, but that's a very small nitpick, and I don't think that's usually asked at this point. It might be, though. Good with that? What is the difference between char and string? In what fashion? So, a char can only ever be one unit in the terms of it can be a letter, it could be a number, but it cannot be multiple numbers, right? Like 50 is not a char. It is a string because it is 2 chars, but okay. Any other questions about that? Alright, we will move on. Module 1. So, what would be printed by the following code if the output is an error, state error in the prompt? So we have A is 4, B is 5, C is B modulus A plus 2, and then print A plus C, string of A plus string of C. So, we know what A is. A does not get reassigned. So A should, in theory, equal 4. And then we have C equals to 5 mod 4 plus 2. So, because of PEMDAS, modulus should go first. So 5 mod 4. Modulus is when you divide, the result is the remainder. So 5 divided by 4 is 1, remainder 1. So that should be 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. So A is 4, C is 3, 4 plus 3 is 7. And then the string of A should be 4 plus the string of C, which is 3, should then have it something like this. And remember, because it is a comma instead of a plus, this will add a space here. Alright. Question 2. What would be printed by the following code? The output is an error. Once again, do that. So, we have A, B equals 4, 11. C equals B, floor division of 3 plus A times 2 minus B mod 3 times 2. Print C. So there's a lot here. I kind of already spoiled this one, saying that this was floor division. What does the times symbol do? Exponent, right? So then the other question is, how are we supposed to evaluate this? Is it just left to right? Is there PEMDAS? And if there is PEMDAS, where would we find that? So we can test this. If we open up some VS Code. So we can just kind of take this by piece. So C equals B, floor division 3. We could print C. So if we start with that, we get it's 3. So looking at that, that would be 11, floor division of 3. 3 times 3 is 9, which is the largest number that goes into 11, so that should make sense. We can then add 4 times 2. And so if we think about this, 4 times 2, according to you guys, is exponent. So 4 squared should be 16. 16 plus 3 is 19, so that makes sense. Then we have B mod 3 times 2. And here we get 17. So that means that this part that we just got should evaluate to 2. And so B is 11 modulus 3. So 3 divided, or 11 divided by 3 is 3 remainder 2. So it's a remainder of 2. Or to the exponent of 2 should be 4 though. So what's going on here? Because if this, right, 11 mod 3 gives you 2, and then it's raised to the second power, that would be 4. 19 minus 4 would be 15, but the result is 17. The exponent comes first. So 3 squared is 9. 11 modulus 9 gives you a remainder of 2 instead. So 19 minus 2 is 17. Does that make sense? If you ever want to be safe while you're doing this with your math, you could always wrap stuff in parentheses. So this might change the order, right? So this would get the first expected output. But yes, exponent does come before modulus, which is why you have to be a little bit careful about just reading it left to right, ignoring pluses and minuses. Any questions on this one? Alright, we'll get on to the next one. So question 3 is select all valid identifier names. So remember that your identifier names can never be a keyword, right? So false and none are not allowed. You should not ever be able to start a variable name with a number. So D is not allowed. Def is also a keyword because that's what we start functions with. 3var, 3 is a number, so we can't start with that one. Dollar with a dollar sign at the end. Dollar signs are not allowed in variable names, so this one is also not allowed. So that leaves us with C, because underscores are allowed in variable names, even at the beginning. And H, because that is just an uppercase camel case. So, on to Module 2 for program control. So this is mostly just evaluating loops. I would strongly recommend that when you're doing this for your exam, that you kind of just write it out. It's a little tedious whenever you write out a loop, but it also makes it the easiest in checking that you don't make careless mistakes, because careless mistakes make people sad. So, product equals 1 for I in range of 1 to 3. So when it says for I in range of 1 to 3, which values are those? I'm seeing 1, 2. So let's just double check this, right? 1, 2. Correct. And then we have for j in range of 1, I plus 1. So what does that look like? So when I is 1, for j in range from 1 to 2 would mean that it would just execute out 1. But for I in range of 2, is it different? Yeah. So if we do this, we could do something like this. So we have 1, then we have from 0 to 1, 2, 2, 0, 1, so on and so forth. Are we good on that? And then, so obviously it then asks what is product times equals I plus j. So the easiest way to just kind of tell what this is doing is we can just put some print statements. So print, say I comma j, and then product times equals I plus j, print product. So we got 1, 0. Yeah, oh wait, I think I mistyped it. Whoops. Boop. Because that number was a little too large. Alright, that looks more correct. Alright, and so we have I and j, right? So that should be 1 and 1. And then obviously 1 plus 1 is 2 times 1 of the product is 2. Then we have 2 and 1. So 2 and 1 would be 3. 2 times 3 is 6. And then we have 2 and 2, which is 4. 6 times 4 is 24. Good on that one? As always, if you're a little confused about the outputs of any of these questions, I'd highly, highly recommend that you just take it line by line, do some print statements, and type it out for yourself. And usually that kind of helps. So, our next question. What is the output of the following program? Neans equals 20. So if neans equals or is less than 20, or 5 is greater than 12, and neans is greater than 30, print true, else print false. So we could just take a look at this evaluation. So this is an or statement, which means only one of the two needs to be true. So is neans less than 20? No. 5 less than 12 is true though, and requires both sides to be true. Yans is greater than 30. Well, it's not, so this would be false. So we have false or true and false. So what would this look like? Does this evaluate to true? Or does it not evaluate to true? False. Yeah, so your AND case can't pass because the left side evaluates to a true, but the right side does not evaluate to a true, right? Because AND requires both sides to be true. So this would just print false. Alright, question 3. What is the output of the following program? A, B, C equals 5, 6, 7. If B is less than 2 or B is greater than 5, so B is 6, which implies it is greater than 5. We have A minus equals 2. So A is currently 5, minus 2 should be 3. And then we have if C is greater than 4, C is 7, so C is greater than 4. A minus equals 1. So 5, it went down 2, so it should be 3. And then it goes down 1 more, so A should be 2. Question 4. What is the output of the following program? For a count in range of 1, 18, 3. What does this 3 indicate for range? Yeah, so it indicates what you increment by. So we can test this real quick. Print I. So as you can see, we start how we would expect. We start at 1, and then this indicates what we increment by. So instead of adding 1 each time, we add 3. 3, 3. And notice the last one is the last valid one, right? It does not go to 19, even though that would be 16 plus 3. So, given this, we can kind of just tell what we're supposed to do here. So, if a count is a modulus 5, or sorry, if a count modulus 5 is equivalent to 0, so that means that there is no remainder when you divide by 5, also known as it is divisible by 5, right? Because, for example, the value of 7 modulus 5 would give you a result of 2, which means it is not divisible. But a value of 10 modulus 5 would be divisible by 5 because it would give you a modulus of 0. So, if it's modulus by 5, that breaks, which means that it completely ends the program, at least in this context because this is all in a loop. The other thing is if the account is modulus or it is divisible by 3, account plus equals 1, continue. So the first value we start with is 1, so clearly that's probably not divisible. So then we go to print, right? So print 1 and add a space. We then go to 4. Is 4 divisible by either of these? Probably not. So we once again print 1 space 4 space. Then we go to 7. 7 divisible by 5? No. Divisible by 3? No. So print 7 space. And then we get to 10. 10 is 10 divisible by 5? Yes. So then it just breaks. And then nothing else happens. So your answer should be 1 space 4 space 7 space. Any questions on that? Okay. For question 5. So find errors in the following program, assuming its goal is to print out whether 2, 3, 5 are the divisors of numbers in the range. So the first thing that might come up is a number can be divisible by multiple different numbers, right? 6 is divisible by 2 and 3. So this should not be in an else if case because multiple of these can execute for the same case, right? So this should not be an else if. This should also not be an else if, right? And then we can look at stuff like commonly print debugging, right? Or rather just print outputs. So when we have a comma, it delineates with a space, and it does not really care about what this integer type is as long as it can convert it to a string. That is different, however, for a plus concatenation, right? If you wanted to do a plus, you would have to turn this into a string first. So this is an error because this needs to be concatenated, or alternatively, you could have used a comma there. If we look at syntax, this if statement is missing, right? Because at the end of each, you should have your little colon, and this one does not, right? And then we have one last issue. If we want to check in the range of I to total, for I in range of 1 to total, is this inclusive of the value at total? For example, if we were at, say, total is equivalent to 10, and we do in range of 1 to 10, is the value of 10 included in our range? Right, so it'd end 1 short. So this should be total plus 1. And so those are all the errors. It kind of depends on how you want to do this. Most traditionally, obviously, you can go top to bottom, but sometimes it's easier to look at it from a logical perspective, just so that you can figure out functionality errors before you look at syntax errors, or vice versa, right? So you could just be like, okay, variable should equal a number. That does. We're good. For something in something, we have a valid range. We have a colon. Okay, that's good. If we have a modulus equals 0, we're missing the colon, obviously. Should it be 1 equals? Or should it be 2 equals? Is this a syntax error? Yep. So that'd be your last set of errors, right? For all of these, it should be equals equals. And then we have our print statement, right? With a comma, it's perfectly fine. With a plus, it is not. Any other questions on this one? And yeah, what was wrong with the if statement was it was missing its colon here. Alright. We shall move on. Alright, predict the output of the following code. Multi of A, B. So we know that this is all in one method call. So if the method is never called, we don't need to worry about it. But if it is called, we do need to worry about it. So the only value we actually care about is print of res. So res is equivalent to multi of num2 and num3. So those are the two values we care about. Num2 is 9, num3 is 18. So that means that in this case, A is equivalent to 9, B is equivalent to 18. Answer equals B plus B times A. And then we need to return the answer, right? So that means we do get the answer back out of this function. So that is valid. So 9 times 18 would basically be the same thing as 19 times that, right? So If we do 18 times 9, we get 162 plus b plus 18, you get 180. I believe HonorLock will provide you a 4-function calculator or a scientific calculator, one of the two. You will not be allowed to use your Windows calculator, if I remember correctly, because technically there's the programmer section, which is a little bit easy to do bases with. As always, double check professor's instructions relating to that. Any questions about how we got to 180 here? Cool. Alright. So we have A and B equals 4 and 5. We have magic called on A and B. And we have print A and B. So we can know what this print statement does already, because A and B are now reassigned here, right? So this print should be 4, and then because it's a comma, it should be a space, so 4 comma 5 should be this one. Now we can look at magic of A and B. So A should be 4, B should be 5. Temp equals A, so temp equals 4. A equals B, which means A now equals 5. And then B equals temp, and temp was 4. So basically the two swapped places, right? So initially it was 4, 5, and now A is 5, B is 4. And then print A, comma, B. So this should be 5 space 4. So the full output should be 5 space 4, 4 space 5. With a new line in between those two. Any questions on that? Next one. Alright, so we have A equals 5, B equals the list of 11, 3, and 9, def magic of A and B. So A equals 4, so A was originally 5, but within this method specifically, it is now 4. B at 1 is now 10. And so the important thing to note here is that a list is an object, which means it is passed in by reference instead of passed in by value. So what does that mean? If a value is passed in and it is a primitive data type, so integers, chars, so on and so forth, what happens is on the back end, the computer will make a copy of that value instead of utilizing that raw value. So if you pass in, say, variable 1 equals 5, right? So that would be an integer. That would be passed in by value, which means that the magic function would create a copy of that integer value 5. So nothing about the original value of 5 would be changed. That is different for objects, such as a list, where it is passed in by reference, which means the value will change. So what that means here is b at 1 equals 10. So this value would change to a 10. That change stays even if you do not return that value. So a equals 4. This one will not change this. B at 1 equals 10. This will change this because it's an object. B equals A. So that would change the local variable of B to point to A. But that does not change that the original one's pointing to it. Are we good on this, or would you guys like me to explain further? And then for the final print statement, A is 5 because A was never updated. B equals 11, 10, 9. Alright. No questions, we will move on. So, predict the output of the following code. If the output is error, state error. So you have the definition of a method, and then we have mystery of a string, and then a second string. So, if you have a default parameter for a method, does this work? So let's copy and paste this and test this, right? So if we have a default parameter, this works, right? If we have another one, this also works. But what happens if we get rid of the default parameter for the second variable? We get a syntax error, right? Non-default argument follows default argument. However, if we do it in this order, we no longer have an error. So the reason for this output being error is because you cannot have a non-default template be before one that does not get assigned a value. So this would be acceptable if it was password then ID equals admin, but because it sets equal to admin here, but does not set password with the default value, it throws an error. Question 5. This one's a fun one. So, def mystery. What does this asterisk and this double asterisk do? Does anyone know? Sets them apart from each other. Okay, well, we can work with that. So, defines arguments and keyword arguments. Ooh. Possible. So, let's get started, right? So, var equals input. So, the user input is 4. So, var should be 4. Then we have for I in range 1 to int of var. So that should be in range from 1 to 4. Mystery of I and equals a space. So at least just for formatting, we know that it's just going to have one space, no new line. Then afterwards, we're going to get a print. Right. So that would be print mystery A, B, A equals 3, num equals 9, B equals 15. Then we need to define mystery. Got quarks. So, we have total equals an empty string. So for arg and args, say we just have this part. So assuming we only evaluate args, which of these values would we expect to actually pass in properly? So, based off our print, right, we have 1, 2, and 3. So in range from 1 to 4, so that implies that mystery at I passes in those ones, right? And then down here, A and B print, but 3, 9, and 15 do not. So let's try the other for loop. For value in quarks.values, total plus equals value. So now if we run that, we notice it only prints out 3, 9, and 15. So what's going on here? Why is printing it out for args going to give us all of these values and A and B, but quarks is giving us 3, 9, and 15? Any guesses? Yes, no, maybe so. Maybe we should brush up on that section. But to get back to answering the question, right? So because all of these are a plus equals on whatever the string value is, right? Because we technically don't need keywords here, right? So the first times we pass in 1, 2, and 3, so we get total equals blank for args and args, so that's just iterating over everything that's passed into it. Total plus equals the string of arg, so the first time it would just be 1, 2 would be 2, 3 would be 3, and so that would match the functionality we have up here, right? We get 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, and then we get to A, and so A would still follow this, so A space, or there would be no space here, just because we didn't have a separate print statement for it. So it would look something like 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, A, then we get to B, and that goes through for arg and args, so that would be B. Then we have A equals 3, and A is a string, right? So instead of running on this one, it runs on this one, which it still just concatenates it. So total plus equals 3. So return total would just be the string of 3. Num is 9, so it would once again go through here. We get 9. B is 15. It goes through here again. 15. Args focuses on default stuff, question mark. Well, this one's not a variable, this one's not a variable, these are variables, these ones are not variables, technically. Or is it because of the keyword arguments? We'll come back to this one if you guys still have questions, but are we good on how to solve it? Hint, hint, if you're curious about these, you could also just Google it. Alright, so we have def square of A, return A times 2. We have def equation of stuff, and then we're trying to find errors. So after every definition, we should have a colon. So we are missing that. Right here, remember that last question where we had to make sure all of our parameters have a default if it's left to right order, right? So because higher order square does not have a default parameter, that is an error. Lambda. What is lambda? A temporary function. Technically, yes. So, given that, we take in some kind of argument, right? And then we evaluate it consequently. So, given this one, does this do what we think it's supposed to do? So we have lambda colon return A times B. So first of all, the definition of lambda does not require a return statement, right? And then Lambda does not have any input parameters, but it requires a times b, right? So we need an argument here to pass in. So that would look something like var equals lambda of a b, so that would pass in a and b, a times b. And so this would evaluate whatever a and b are, and that would get you the correct value. And then so we have higher order square of a plus higher order square of b plus 2 times higher order product of a times b, or a and b. We have one problem. We never utilize this value. Nothing here is utilized, so we should have a return statement. Down here we have potential formatting issues. So this is all a string. And then we have plus the equation of a, b, and square. Except equation, in theory, returns a numerical value, and we cannot add a string to a numerical value straight. So instead of a plus, it should be a comma, or we need to typecast one side. Any questions on that? Okay, so convert the binary number 0b0111011 to decimal number. So we can start this on the right hand side, or we can just go straight down. So 1110011. Let's see, are you supposed to catch all issues in order to get full credit? Yes. There is partial credit though. If you do not get all of them, you will not lose all your points. So our string is something like this, right? So we know that a left-sided 0 should not do anything, but we can start at the bottom. So this is times 2 to the 0th, times 2 to the 1st, times 2 to the 2nd, times 2 to the 3rd, times 2 to the 4th, times 2 to the 5th, times 2 to the 6th, times 2 to the 7th, even though this one's technically not necessary. So obviously anything times 0 is 0, so we can just fill those in. And then, so 2 to the 0th is 1, 2, so this would be 4, this would be 8, this would be 16, this is 32, this is 64. And then, if we summation this, 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 2 plus 1. The answer is 115. Convert the octal number 77 to a binary number. So there are two ways we could do this. We could do it taking it by digit and turning that into a binary number. Or the alternative is we could convert it to decimal and then turn it into binary the long way. But so if we wanted to do it straight from octal to binary, we first need to figure out what is the binary evaluation of 7. So 7 is equivalent to what in binary? So we know the first place is 1s, second place is 2, third place is 4. 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. So the answer is 111. Alternatively, if we aren't really good about how do I find the binary number off the top of my head, so the first thing we need to do for 7 is figure out what is the largest power of 2 that fits into it. So that would be 1, 2, 4, 8, so on and so forth. So from here we can tell that 7 is the largest, or the largest power that fits into 7 is 4, right? And so this is 2 to the 0th, 2 to the 1st, 2 to the 2nd. So we know that 7 has 2 to the 2nd in it. So there would be a 1 times 2 to the 2nd equals 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. So now the next largest power that fits into 3 should be 2. So that would be 1 times 2 to the first, because 2 to the first is 2. So equals 2. 3 minus 2 equals 1. And then what's the largest power that goes into 1? Would be 2 to the 0th. 1 times 2 to the 0th equals 1. 1 minus 1 equals 0. Right? And then if we just look at the spots that are actually relevant for math purposes, we have 1, 1, 1, which gets us 7. And because it's 7, 7, the binary equivalent would literally just be 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, or without spacing, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Are we good on how we took an octal number and made it into binary? Okay. Other way we could have done this is turn this into a decimal. So that gets pretty annoying, but we can take a look at that. So to get the decimal value of this, we know that 77 is equivalent to 7 times 8 to the 0th, and then 7 times 8 to the first. So in decimal form, 7 times 8 is 56, plus 7 is 63, and now we need to be 63 in decimal into binary. And so the largest power that fits into 63 is 32, which should be 2 to the 5th. So 2 to the 5th, we'd have 63 minus 32, which would give us 31. The largest power that goes into that is 16. So 31 minus 16, 2 to the 4th. We add a 1 there. We then get 15 minus 8, 2 to the 3rd. That gives us 7. And then we go through that once more. 7 minus 4, 2 to the 2nd, gets us 3, minus 2, which is 2 to the 1st, 1, minus 1, 2 to the 0th. So that would be 1, 1, 1. Any questions on that? Alright. Number 9. Convert the decimal number 78 to binary, octal, and hexadecimal. So, if we get to binary, we can easily convert it to octal and hexadecimal. So we'll just do that first. So 78. The largest power that goes into 78 for binary would be 64. So we put a 1 there. So 78 minus 64 is 14. So the next largest power is 32, which does not fit. So we put a 0 here. The next largest power would be 16, which does not fit. So we put another 0 here. The next one is 8, and that one does fit. So we put a 1 here. 14 minus, 14, I'm struggling. 14 minus 8 is 6. So our new value is 6. The next largest power is 4. Minus 4, it's 2. So we get a 1. Then the next largest power is 2. So we have 1. And then obviously 2 minus 2 is 0. And then we need to make sure we don't forget about 2 to the 0th power, which is 1. So if we double check this, did we convert this properly? 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0. This in decimal is 78, so we have done the correct thing. So this is in binary. So octal we take every third place. So 1, 2, 3, space, 1, 2, 3, space. Reminder that on the left side, we can always pad zeros if we want to make sure it makes sense. So if we take this by digit for octal, it is 1, because 0, 0, 1 is 1, 0, 0, 1 is 1. And then here we have 1 times 2 to the first, which is 2. 1 times 2 to the second, which is 4. Right? So 4 plus 2 is 6. So 116 is 116. Then hexadecimal, as we've mentioned in class, instead of 2 to the third, which is 8, hexadecimal is 2 to the fourth, which is 16, which means it is 4 decimal places. So we can format this differently, so we can take it by 4. And we can get rid of this random 0. So 0, 1, 0, 0. So this would be 2 to the 0th, 2 to the first, 2 to the second. So that would be a 4. Then here we have 2 to the 0th is nothing. 2 to the first is 2, plus 2 to the second, which is 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6. Then this is 2 to the third, which is 8. So 8 plus 6, I believe, is 14. 8 plus 6 is 14, yeah. And so this is technically 14, but we need the letter equivalent of that. And so if f is 15, 1 away from 15 should be 14, which is E. So we translate that into 4E. Good on that. Any questions? Okay. 2 more questions, and then we are officially done with this, besides the free responses. So what is the output for the following program? Line equals Gator 61948. Print line at -3, 0 to 1. What does a negative index do? Moves backwards. Yep. So -1 would be the last element in the array. So that would make -1, -2, -3, and then 0 to 1 means in range, basically, from 0 to 1, except because it's a range of 1, that would just be the first element, or the 0th index. So this first one would be 6. Now print line of 0 to 2. So that would be this first index. Would it be the second index as well? Or no? Well, so this would result in, let's look at that. So array equals Gator 619. Let's start with just printing the first one. So line from 0 to 2. Oh, whoops. Array. There we go. So 0 to 2 prints out indexes 0 and 1, which gives us Gator and 619. So it would print out both of these. And then we access that at 0. So if this is an array and we access it at 0, we would just get Gator, right? So we just get Gator. And then we have a cool little iterator. So it's 2 colons and then a negative 1. So if this is the starting index, and this is the ending index, blank, but then the iterator index is negative 1, we would iterate in reverse. So we get rho to G. And then line at 1 is equal to high. So at 1 would be here. And because this is an object, it does replace it. And then so when it prints line, we would have bracket, because it would be printing out a list, the string of gator, comma, the string of high, comma, 4, comma, 8. And so we can just take a look at that, right? Array at 1 equals test, print, array. So as you notice, the brackets there, gator, comma, test, comma. What is the output of the following program? If the output is an error, state error in the prompt. So we have a list, Python, CS1, fun, and programming. And so we established that this negative 1 iterator goes in which direction? Reverse, right? So if we go up to the last index, we have 0 to the nth index, but that's the end of it, right? So if we were to think about this in terms of numbers, we have index 0, 1, 2, and 3. If we want to do words from nothing, so that's basically the start, right, to negative 1. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. Negative 1 would be this third index, so it would be in equivalence 0 to 3, which would cover 0, 1, and 2. So we would get Python, CS1, and fun. We then have print words with just a colon, so that would just iterate through all of them. So we would get Python, CS1, fun, and programming. Then we have print of 0 to the negative first with a 2 value here. And so this is the start index, this is the end index, and then this is the incrementing, right? So we'd start at 0, we'd go to negative 1, which we kind of just evaluated as basically being equivalent to 0 to 3 here. And then we're doing increments by 2. So we start with Python, and we print that out. Then this is the next one, but we skip that because we have an iterator of 2. And we print out fun. So we get Python fun. Any questions on those? Yes, no, maybe so. Alright. If that's the case, I will go on to the next section. Oh, okay, let's see. If it was just the iterator, would it print the words backwards or just the orders? So we are only accessing the list here, right? Because if we look at the number of brackets here, this is one set of brackets, which kind of equates to this list. So if we wanted to print a string in here backwards, we would have to have a second set of brackets. So if, for example, I had words here and then added this bracket here, we would then get a reverse printed order. Does that make sense? If it was colon, colon, negative 1, it would just be the order. Yes, so we can demo that. So we can do print array colon colon -1. And then we could also do print array colon 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 -1. So here we have the iterator, right? So this would be first index, second index, -1, and that does go Gators, right? And then here we have it again, but it seems to do the same thing. So what's going on with that, right? So what if we put 0 here? Does this change the functionality? It does. And so the reason why is because this iterator is dependent on basically what evaluates here, right? So what evaluates here is a string, which then means that this iterates in reverse on that string specifically. But if this is just a colon, that entails the entire array. And so it would then print the array in reverse, which has the exact same functionality as the first one. Does that make sense? Uh-huh. Alright, and then we will go over the coding section really briefly. So write a method identica digits that takes in an integer num in the range of 10 to 90. This method doesn't return anything. Prints out a count up starting from the integer num and stopping when both output digits are identical. You must use a loop. Alright, so things that we should look out for on this one is definition, right? Definition of identical digits of num, right? It should not be a different variable name here since it says it explicitly. And then it does not have a print statement. Or sorry, it does not have a return statement, but it does have a print statement, right? And so we would have a for loop, right? Because it says you must use a loop. And then we need to make sure we in some way have a break command, right? Because it stops when both output digits are identical. And a broad way, the easiest way to do this is modulus 10, right? Because that would evaluate whatever the tens place is divisible by. So 7 7 divided by 10 would of course give you 0. 7 mod 10 would give you 7, which is the ones place. So if we look at that, say the value of 68, 68 mod 10 gives you 8. 68 divided by 10 gives you 6. And now you have a pretty easy way of comparing whether or not the digits places are equivalent to each other. So in some way we probably have def of identical digits num for I in range of num to say 100 or whatever our parameters are. We would then have print I and equals a space because that's what they said. And then if I divided by 10 is equivalent to I mod 10, we probably have a break statement. Any questions on that? Cool. And then we have a few other questions. So this one is print a triangle. So it takes in a positive integer base and prints a triangle made out of asterisks. So this should be some kind of for loop, most likely, right? Because you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Positive integer base. So we know what parameters we're taking in, right? We're taking in an integer, so we wouldn't need to typecast it into a string, or from a string rather. Prints a triangle made of asterisks with a base of the given size. I'll leave these ones to you guys. This is just the inverse. Maybe investigate how do you start a loop from the maximum value instead of the minimum value. A prime number is a whole number greater than 1, which is only divisible by 1 in itself. Write a method, right, def method, to detect whether a number is prime or not. So if a number is prime, it is not divisible by any number less than it that is not 1. So maybe you have some kind of for loop, and then you check if modulus is ever equivalent to 0 for a value that is not 1. And then the last one, a user will enter an initial number followed by that number of integers. Output those integers sums. Repeat until the initial number is 0 or negative. So in some way you need to check whether or not this first value dictates how many you should input, right? And then it should run a sum on those. Then you should get an output. So you probably have some kind of while loop while this value is not 0, and then decrement it within the loop, and then take these numbers that get passed into the input and summation them. And then on 0, of course, you would end. Any questions on those? Alright, that was your exam 1 review. Good luck on your exam.